So these are the tools that I used. Now you can do this with impacts, but I wouldn't recommend it because it could damage the lugs and cause over torque. But I mean, you can do what you want. For the front, after you get the wheel off, because I'm doing this by myself, I'm using a flat blade to stick in the rotor to keep it from turning while I tighten it. This isn't needed when you untighten it, as long as you follow the recommended procedure. Leave the wheel on the ground, undo the bolt like a turn, a quarter of a turn, half turn, full turn, however you want to do it, and then raise it up and then unloosen the rest of the way. I have a 3/4 inch ratchet. I like the one with the push button so you don't have to worry about the socket slipping off. Any kind of tool to clean off the rust or to clean the hub. I have a 1/2 inch breaker bar. I don't remember exactly how long it is, but it works for me. I have a 19 socket and a adapter for the breaker bar and the torque wrench. This is going to be for the new nuts that go on the spacer to the hub. This is not for the wheeled lug nuts. The wheel lug nuts are a 21 in my case. I'm using 1/2 inch with just a slight extension. Now, don't be fooled. I know that you're not supposed to undo lug nuts or any kind of bolts with a torque wrench. It's only for tightening. I understand that, hence why I have the brake bar. The wood is also to help stabilize the wheel while you're tightening or loosening. You put them underneath one side. That way the rotation will friction on the wood and it'll keep it from spinning. Same principle with the flathead piece of block, wood, whatever. Jack stands, and then my jack with wood to give me enough lift. So that's the tools pretty much, other than the actual spacer. Other than that, so yeah, obviously one for the front, one for the back. The first thing that I do is I'll take the ratchet and I'll undo all of these. So that way they're loose. They don't come super tight from, I can't remember the company name. I'll get that for you in a little bit. But they come not tight like torque down, but they come tightened so that way they obviously don't fall off. And they come in a stack and they're wrapped up. And then what I do is I just take them off, keep the nuts safe somewhere, so that way you don't lose them. Because these are actually what you're going to use to attach it to the hub. The stock nuts are not pass-through like these ones are. You see the new nut, it's got a hole in the middle, pass-through, and the stock nuts are one piece. Well, not, I don't know if they're one piece, but they're non-pass-through, so you can't use those, which was my original plan, is to use those on the hub and then new ones for the wheel. But I have already ordered some new ones, and they're on their way. They should be here soon. But yeah, so that's what I do first. And now give me a second to set up and we'll get the wheel off and put the hub on. Alright, so what I do to set up to get this process started, I got 3 pieces of 2x4, just kind of cut them down, and I'll stack them on my hydraulic jack. And what I'll do is I take this and I'll position this jack underneath where the stock running board, rock kicker, whatever you want to call it, where that meets the frame is where I'm going to try to line it up. So if you can see right there, that's where it meets the frame. So I'm going to try to line it up right there. That's not one specific reason, but other than if they have something tied into the frame right there, it's obviously a strong portion of the frame. One thing you got to make sure is you don't have your jack on one side too far, because you can throw off the load and it can fall on you, or whatever you want to call it, or not call it, but you deal with splinters. Anyway, so you want to try to keep it as even as possible, front and back, side to side. And then the frame itself is not exactly square, but it does have a flat. So you want to try to get as much of that centered on that wood as possible, or pad, or whatever you're using. I so happen I'm able to get it kind of right in the middle, if you can see. So I line it up such as that. Then I take my jack stand and I'll put it right here where that plate meets the frame, where that cross member meets the frame. So, but what I'll do is I'll jack it a couple pumps just to get some load off the tire, so it's a little bit easier to loosen those nuts, but I won't take the tire completely off the ground. It's still touching. And I'll take my 21 with my extension, my breaker bar, and boom. I'm not going to bore you with watching me take all these nuts off. This is just a cover. These are the locking hubs. So I'm just going to sit here and unloosen all these, and then once I'm done, I'll come right back. Alright, so I got them all untightened. Now, as you can see, the wheel's still on the ground. Just a little bit of advice. You want to make sure that when you untightening or tightening, I don't know if it necessarily matters too much when you're untightening, but it's just a good practice to keep, is you don't ever want to just go one right after the other. You always want to alternate. And the easiest way I've learned is to do the star pattern. So you take one, go across, you come back and go to the opposite side of either one. So say if you start here, go across. So here, go across, come back, go across, come back, go across. So it's basically star pattern, or however you want to look at it. Inverse pi, whatever. Just as long as you do that, you should be fine. That is mainly for when you're tightening or torquing, so that way it's an even torque all the way around. You don't put too much strain on one bolt more than the other. And it also allows it to seat flush against the hub, or the spacer in this case, so that way you're not damaging anything. Now at this point, I've got them all, like I said, I've got them all loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start jacking up the truck. I'm going to put the truck in the air. Enough to where the wheel's off the ground. Probably about inch and a half, maybe 2 inches. I'm not good at math. And I'm going to take my stand and I'm going to make sure that it can sit high enough to where it'll keep the wheel off the ground, but the weight is on. The weight is on. It's not tall enough, so we gotta go up a little bit. Always be careful when you're using the jack. Make sure you're utilizing a jack that's rated for what you're doing. And I found a little trick. Now, this is just what I do. I sit, instead of just going like full crank to loosen it, what I'll do is I'll wiggle it slowly, and that allows me to let it out very, very incrementally. So that way I can make sure that everything sits. Now, once I know that the stand and the tire have it supported, I'm going to take the jack stand. I'm going to keep it where it's at and just go 1 pump, 2 pump, to where I feel the resistance. Not to try to lift it up off the jack, but just to give it an extra little bit of support, so that way it's not just sitting on one spot. Now at this point, the wheel lugs are already loosened to the point to where all you really got to do is unscrew them. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, and once I'm done with that, I'll come back. Alright, so the lug nuts are off. The next step is just to pull the wheel off the hub. And then once it's off, just set it out of the way. Now, this part it's all user preference. You do it however you want. But you want to clean this up. Get as much of these rust particles off. Get it clean. Now I'm not going to sit here and bore you with this, but what it's going to end up happening is you're going to clean the surface so you got a good mating surface for the spacer and the hook. You want to also make sure you get good attention to the studs, because that's what your plate is going to be meeting up to. Now yours may look different than mine because it may have different caps. It may not be locking, maybe the two-wheel drive version, I don't know, but it's basically the same from this point forward for any vehicle application. It just may look different. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this guy prepared and put on the hub after I get it all cleaned up. One side note, I'm not doing it because I don't have the supplies, because this is just temporary. I'm going to be taking this all off and doing it properly. This is just kind of it's a demonstration because I don't see any of these anywhere. But one key thing you can put anti-seize on the mating surface, and then some Loctite on the studs if you want. I don't think it's necessary, but for those that are very safety cautious, that's something that you can do. Another thing is you can mark the nuts after you tighten them, and then go back and check them, 200, 300 miles, 50 miles if you want, whatever, just to retorque them. It is recommended to retorque all of your nuts regardless after, I think it's like 50 miles or so. I'm not an expert, so don't quote me. If you do this, it's at your own expense. I'm not liable for anything, yada yada yada, so whatever. But yeah, so I'm gonna get this taken care of, get this brushed off, and then get the hub put on. Alright, so when I said put the hub on, I meant the spacer. So the way the spacer goes on, for common sense purposes, is there's a hole, and then there's a new stud. Obviously, the new stud does not go over the old stud. The new stud goes next to the old stud. So you want to put the old stud through the hole, which it's designed for, and then make sure it's lined up. Now, my application did not come with the hub-centric adapter piece, because one, I have locking hubs, and two, the way that it's designed is you have these nuts. Now they're rounded at the bottom, and if you can see, let me pull this off real quick. If you can see down there, there's a lip, or not a lip, but like a chamfer in the bottom where that corresponds with the nut. So it'll self-align once it's in place, just like a tire lug nut will. Now, what I do is I'll just get them started, and it's easier to use the socket, obviously. And the recommendations from the company that I purchased these from is to ensure that the new lug has a contact turn of at least 7 to 9. So I start at 8. So what I do is I'll take this socket, the 19, and I'll put it on the old lug with the 19 facing up, and then I'll count the rotations. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there, at this point, I'm past the minimum. and I have now made almost 9 rotations. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that I'm within the limits, and I know by the other 2 that I've already done that all of my bolts or lug bolts are all still in good condition. They're all still the same size. They have not been replaced with anything aftermarket, so I don't have to worry about sizing differences. So I'll just go through and add all of the rest of these hand tight. I'm not torquing anything, I'm not using the ratchet, I'm just putting these in their place, so that way it's easier to do so, to torque them in just a little bit. So I'm going to finish doing this, and I'll be back for the torquing portion. Alright, so I got them all hand tight at this point. What I do next is I'll take the ratchet and I'll attach it, and since it'll free spin, that's where I get the screwdriver. I put it in. There's a slot here on the brake caliper. There's a cover, metal dust cover. You don't want to damage that. But if you see close enough, you can see the rotor underneath of it before it makes contact with the brake pad. So I'll take my screwdriver and I will insert it into that slot on the opposite side of the dust shield, so that way it doesn't damage anything. And this will now allow me to pre-torque these down. If I had to guess, probably be like 10 foot-pounds. One man's oomph. Just enough to where it centers itself, utilizing that built-in feature that these have. Now again, you're not torquing these down yet, you're just getting them in place. Now, once that's done, get your torque wrench, get your appropriate bit, extension, whatever you need to use, your adapter, now for me, I just throw on before I throw on this extension, make it a little bit easier for me. Work smarter, not harder. This would be a lot easier with 2 hands, but whatever. Now, I wouldn't recommend putting metal on your paint if you don't want to damage it. Let's see if we can figure it out here. Alright, so at this present moment, I have my torque wrench set to 100 foot-pounds. This little turning knob thing doesn't like to stay in its spot because my lock mechanism doesn't really work too well. But how to work it out? You've got an unlock and lock feature on the back. You have to unlock it to adjust it, lock it to set it in place. These marks represent, these marks here at the bottom represent single digits that correspond to the larger digits. So right now I have that set to 100 foot-pounds. So if I have it set to the next mark, it'd be 101 foot-pounds, 102, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way back over to 0. Because once you make that full rotation, you're now at 110. So that is how you read the torque wrenches. Now this one states it goes up to 150. I've never gone up that high, so I don't know. But I'm torquing these nuts to 100 foot-pounds based off of recommendation by the manufacturer. Now you want to make sure that you lock your torque wrench as best you can. Now at this point, you want to make sure that you have this secured so that way it doesn't move on you, and you begin to torque. And if you listen, you'll be able to hear it. That's how you know they're torqued. And again, you're going to go in the star pattern. But make sure that your mechanism to lock the hub doesn't fall out. You just repeat this for all the nuts. Another thing, once you get everything torqued, what I like to do is I'll go back through and I'll double check that they're all torqued. Once everything's torqued, you don't necessarily have to do the star pattern because you're not tightening anymore, you're just double checking the torque. And as you can hear and see, I'm completely torqued. Now the hub portion is done. This is all secure. Take out your device to keep your hub from spinning. And now you are done with the spacer. Everything is from this point forward just putting your tire back on. That's the only thing. Make sure you torque the exact same way you torqued the nuts on this one and your star pattern. Do the exact same thing for your tire when you put your tire back on. I'm not going to waste your time with watching me put a tire back on, because if you don't know how to do tire changes, you shouldn't be driving to begin with. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. If they're stupid or common sense dictates that you shouldn't have said anything, I'm not going to respond. But yeah, have a good day.